The night my coworker Kevin set me up on a blind date, I learned something I should have already known about people who call themselves your friends. Some of them don't root for you. They just want a good story to tell on Monday morning. My name is Scott. I'm 31. I work in project coordination for a mid-sized construction firm in Calgary, and at the time this happened, I had been single for almost 2 years. Not tragically single, not bitterly single, just single in that quiet way that happens after a relationship ends well enough that you can't even be angry about it. Renee and I had been together for 3 years, and when it ended like a long exhale, not a slam, just a slow releasing of pressure on both sides. We wanted different things. She wanted Vancouver, I wanted to stay. That was it. No villain, no betrayal, just geography and honesty arriving at the same time. After that, I stopped trying for a while. Not because I was wrecked, because I was actually fine, and fine felt like something worth protecting. Then Kevin started in on me. Kevin is the kind of guy who means well in the way that makes things worse. He genuinely believed he was doing me a favor. He'd been married to Nicole for 6 years. They had 2 kids and a house in Tuscany Park, and he had fully committed to the idea that single people are an unfinished project. He started mentioning someone named Claire at work. "She's great, man. You'd like her." He said it the way people say things they've already decided about. I nodded and changed the subject 3 times in 2 weeks. Then he invited me to dinner. "Just a few people," he said. "Nicole's making her lamb tagine. Very low-key." I should have recognized the phrase low-key for what it was. Nothing low-key has ever followed the words low-key. The dinner was at their place in the southwest end, a newer semi-detached, with a good backyard they never used and a kitchen that smelled like cardamom and garlic when I walked in. Nicole hugged me at the door with slightly too much warmth. There were 2 other couples already at the table, people I vaguely knew from Kevin's circle, and one woman sitting at the end who looked up when I came in. I saw it immediately. Not because of her, because of the room. That tiny collective readjustment that happens when people think something interesting is about to unfold. A chair scraping slightly. Someone picking up a wine glass for no reason. Kevin's buddy Derek leaning back with this relaxed, watching expression that had no business being on someone's face at a dinner party. The woman at the end of the table met my eyes for exactly 1 second before looking back at her water glass. Her name, I found out as Kevin made the introduction with slightly too much enthusiasm, was Claire. She was around my age, maybe a year or 2 older. Dark natural hair pulled back loosely, a burgundy cardigan, small gold hoops. She had the kind of face that looked like it had made a decision about this evening already and wasn't sure yet what the decision was. She was a bigger woman, plus size, solidly built, and she carried herself like someone who had learned a long time ago that her presence was going to be a referendum for other people, whether she asked for it or not. So she simply chose not to notice. "Claire, this is Scott," Kevin said. "Scott, Claire. She teaches at Mount Royal." "Hi," Claire said, measured, not cold. Measured. "Hey," I said. There was a beat of silence in which the entire table quietly waited to see what my face would do. I pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down. "Kevin told me this was low-key," I said to no one in particular. Claire looked at me from the side. "He told me the same thing. We were both misled, apparently. At least the food smells good." Her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something smaller, more careful. Like she was testing whether it was safe to find this funny yet. The first 20 minutes were what I expected them to be. Conversations that kept angling toward us and then recovering. Nicole asking questions with the bright, slightly strained energy of a person who had invested real hope in a plan going well. Derek, Kevin's friend, contributing nothing useful except a kind of spectator's comfort, like he'd shown up to watch something and was willing to be patient. Claire handled it better than any of them deserved. She talked about her students. She taught English literature to second-year undergrads at Mount Royal, and she had a way of describing them that was somehow both exasperated and genuinely fond. One student had written an entire essay on The Great Gatsby using only sports metaphors. Another had submitted a paper arguing that Hamlet was actually an introvert with poor time management. "What did you give him?" I asked. "A B+," she said. The argument was weak, but the commitment was admirable. I laughed, actually laughed. Kevin glanced over. Then Derek opened his mouth. He had been quiet long enough that I had started to forget about him. He leaned forward with a half grin, the kind men wear when they think they're being entertaining, and said, "So, Scott, honestly, is Claire more your speed, or did Kevin pull a fast one on you?" The table went quiet the way a room does when someone has said something that can't be unsaid. I set my fork down. Claire didn't move, but I saw it, just the smallest stiffening in her shoulders. The practiced stillness of a person who has heard variations of that question before and has learned not to give the room the reaction it's angling for. That was the moment. The real one. Not the setup, not the awkward introduction, not Kevin's performance at the door. This was when the evening became about something other than dinner. I looked at Derek. "No," I said. The table held its breath. "She's the most interesting person at this table by a distance. So if you're asking whether Kevin did me a favor, the answer is looking like yes." I turned slightly toward Claire, not performing anything, just making sure she heard it directly. Which doesn't fix the fact that neither of us actually agreed to a setup. Nobody moved. Derek's grin dissolved. Kevin looked at his plate. Nicole stared at her wine. Claire looked at me then, not with relief, not yet, with something more careful than that. Like she was quietly revising an assessment. "For the record," she said, after a pause, "I was told this was a low-key dinner with a few people." "Me too. So they lied to both of us." "Consistently," I said. "That's almost impressive." The table breathed again, but differently. The spectator energy was gone. What replaced it was the somewhat uncomfortable awareness of people who had wanted to watch something and had instead been noticed watching. Derek went quiet for the rest of dinner. I didn't feel bad about that. What happened after was the part nobody in that room had planned for. Claire and I started actually talking, not performing conversation for an audience. Talking, she asked what I did, and when I explained project coordination, the unglamorous reality of it, the budget tracking and the contractor calls, and the weeks-long argument I just wrapped up over load-bearing wall specifications, she didn't politely nod. She asked a follow-up question about how I managed disagreements between trades, and it turned into a 20-minute conversation about institutional communication and why people in hierarchies lie to each other by default. She had opinions. Sharp ones. She'd been at Mount Royal for 4 years and had watched the administration restructure her department twice in ways that made no pedagogical sense and complete political sense. She described the second restructuring with the kind of dry precision that meant she had been angry about it for a long time and had refined the anger into something more useful. By the time Nicole brought out dessert, butter tarts, which is the correct choice, I had completely lost track of the table around us. Kevin appeared at my elbow at one point and said, "You two seem to be hitting it off," with the satisfied smile of a man expecting a thank you. Claire looked at him. "Did you want a medal?" Kevin blinked. "You set us up without asking," she said. "It's not a favor if we didn't request it. I just thought." "I know what you thought," she said, calm, precise, "and I'm not interested in being someone's experiment. But," she glanced at me, "the company has improved." Kevin retreated. I looked at her. "You had that ready," I said. "I had that ready before I walked in," she said. "Was it supposed to be longer?" She considered this. "I had a version with more historical context. What stopped you?" She looked at me. "You sat down." I didn't know what to do with that, so I ate a butter tart and thought about it. The evening ended slowly. Coats were gathered. Nicole hugged everyone with the slightly deflated energy of someone whose plan had both succeeded and failed in ways she wasn't sure how to account for. Derek left without making eye contact with me, which I found quietly satisfying. Claire and I ended up at the door at the same time. Outside, it was a cold March night, the kind Calgary does well. Clear sky, hard stars, that dry cold that gets into your collar in the first 10 seconds. We stood on Kevin's front step while our respective ride shares loaded. "Well," she said. "Yeah," I said. We stood there for a moment in the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable, which was strange given that we'd known each other for 3 hours. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "You've been doing that all night," she said. "You don't need to ask permission." Fair. When Derek said what he said, "Did you want to respond?" She looked at the sky for a second. "I always want to respond. The question is whether it costs me more than it costs them." That sentence had a long history behind it. I didn't push at it. "You didn't need me to say anything," I said. "No, but—" She looked at me. "But you said it anyway. And you said it like I was just the person sitting next to you. Not a situation to be managed." She pulled her jacket tighter. That's not nothing. My chest did something I hadn't planned on. Kevin's going to take credit for this, I said. Kevin's going to tell this story at every dinner party for a year, she said. It's already gone. We could deny it. We could. She didn't sound convinced. A car pulled up to the curb, hers from the way she glanced at it. Or you could ask me to get coffee, she said. Somewhere that wasn't Kevin's idea. I could do that. You haven't yet. I looked at her. Claire, would you like to get coffee? With no witnesses, no agenda, no one who arranged it. She tilted her head. That's a low bar. It's a starting point. She almost smiled. Saturday, but not Tim's. There's a place on 17th Avenue, small, good espresso. Nobody we know. That works. Her car was waiting. She opened the door, then turned back. For the record, she said, I had you assessed as probably decent before you said anything to Derek. What tipped it? You looked at me like you were curious, she said. Not like you were deciding. Then she got in the car and left. I stood on Kevin's front step in the cold for probably longer than was necessary, with the strong feeling that something had happened tonight that Kevin was going to be insufferably proud of. For the wrong reasons. Saturday arrived, with the specific cruelty of a week that moved too slowly. I spent more time than I'd like to admit thinking about the coffee place on 17th. Whether it was too small, whether it was too loud, whether suggesting it had been presumptuous. I arrived 8 minutes early and occupied myself pretending to look at my phone. Claire walked in at exactly the time we'd agreed on, wearing a green coat and carrying a canvas tote that had a library logo on it and looked like it had been used extensively. She scanned the room, found me, and crossed over without any of the slight hesitation that first meeting energy usually creates. You're early, she said. I'm always early. It's a project coordination problem. You plan for contingencies, obsessively. She sat down. The cafe was the right kind of small. 4 tables, a counter, a chalkboard menu that changed weekly, a barista named Joel who didn't make conversation unless you started it. Joel, I decided, was exactly right for this. We ordered. I got an Americano. She got a cortado and then looked at the pastry case for a long moment before getting a lemon square. I'm not sharing that, she said. I didn't ask. You were going to. I was thinking about it. She broke the lemon square in half and put one piece on my saucer. That was the kind of person she was. I registered it without making a thing of it. The coffee became 2 hours. She talked about her students with the same exasperated affection as before, but more. A student named, she was careful about names, said only one of my third years, who had come to her office hours so many times that Claire had started keeping a second box of tea just for her. Not because it was her job, because the girl was working 3 shifts at a grocery store and still somehow writing the most interesting papers in the seminar. What do you do with a student like that? I asked. You write the strongest reference letter of your career, she said, and you hope the system doesn't eat her before she gets where she's going. I told her about the project I'd just finished, a community center in Forest Lawn, the kind of job that looks straightforward until you're 3 weeks in and the mechanical contractor hasn't shown up in 10 days. The moment when you realize that the people who are supposed to be coordinating with you have completely different ideas about what coordination means. That's not a construction problem, she said. No, I said. It's a language problem. She looked at me. You know that's what I study. I'm aware that's not a coincidence. She laughed. Real and sudden, the kind that surprised her. She covered her mouth briefly, which I found disproportionately memorable. We left the cafe and walked without deciding to. 17th Avenue in March is not its most charming. Gray sky, the snow half melted, to gray slush on the curbs, wind coming off the mountains like it has a point to prove. None of that mattered. We walked for 40 minutes, and I don't think either of us noticed where we were going. At some point she said, Kevin texted me this morning. What did he say? He said, and I'm quoting, "You're welcome." What did you say back? Nothing, she said. Yet, thinking of a response? Something with historical context, she said. I laughed. She stopped walking at a corner. We'd gone further than made sense given that neither of us had a reason to be in this direction. I need to get back, she said. I'm marking papers tonight. How bad is it? The romantic poetry unit, she said. So, mixed. Good luck. She adjusted the strap on her tote. For a moment, neither of us said anything, which by now felt natural rather than awkward. like we'd already established a shorthand for comfortable silence. This was good, she said. It was. She looked at me. Ask me again. Claire, I said, would you like to do this again? Without Kevin's involvement, without a pre-arranged agenda, just this. She considered it with unnecessary deliberateness. Yes, she said, but somewhere with better pastry. I'll find somewhere with better pastry. That's a promise, she said, not lightly. She walked back toward the main street, and I stood at the corner in the gray March cold with the very clear sense that I was in something now. Not a setup, not a dinner party story, something actual. The second date was a Friday night, a small French-Canadian bistro on Center Street that a colleague had mentioned once and I had looked up with more intention than I admitted to myself. Claire arrived in a charcoal blazer over a floral dress, and I noticed that she never seemed to dress for an occasion in the way people perform dressing up. She dressed for herself. It was a distinction I noticed and didn't say out loud. We shared charcuterie and then argued about whether Mordecai Richler was funnier than he was mean. Claire's position was that the distinction was the point. I disagreed, just to keep it going. She knew I was doing it and engaged anyway, which told me something useful about her. By the end of dinner, the restaurant had gone quiet around us without either of us noticing. She told me about her family. Her parents had come from Trinidad when her mother was pregnant with her, settled in Brampton, moved west when Claire was 12. She'd done her undergrad at U of C, her master's at Queen's, come back to Calgary because it still felt like the place she knew how to be. Does that make sense? She asked. Completely, I said. I grew up here. I've left twice for work and come back twice. Why? The mountains, I said. And because I understand the weather even when it's terrible. She looked at me. That's a surprisingly honest answer. Did you expect dishonest? I expected generic, she said. People usually say something about opportunity or quality of life. The mountains are the quality of life. They are, she said. After dinner, we walked toward the river pathway, still cold but drier than the week before. The kind of March evening when you can almost believe April is coming. She took my arm somewhere around the second block, not dramatically, just comfortably, like it was the practical solution to two people walking close together on a narrow pathway. I liked it. I didn't make a thing of it. I just liked it. We talked for an hour by the river, about her students and my contractors, and whether the CBC was still worth defending, about the particular Calgary experience of knowing everyone has a winter bad period, and just agreeing not to mention it. She told me about a writer she was building a seminar unit around, a Black Canadian poet I'd never heard of, not to my credit, and described the work in a way that made me want to read it, which I told her. I'll send you something, she said. She did, the next morning. 3 poems and a short essay with a note that said, "These are the texts. Form your own opinion before I tell you mine." I read them twice, formed an opinion, texted it to her. She responded 40 minutes later, wrong about the second one, right about the third. We'll discuss. We discussed over the phone that night for an hour and 20 minutes. I sat on my couch in the dark and forgot to turn the lights on. A month later, Kevin cornered me in the break room at work. Nicole wants to know how it's going with Claire, he said, with the studied casualness of someone who had been instructed to seem casual. I got coffee and looked at him. Claire and I are seeing each other, I said. That happened because she's an exceptional person and we happen to get along. It didn't happen because of the dinner. Kevin looked mildly wounded. I did set you up, though. You set us up like it was an experiment, I said. Derek asked her if she was my type in front of a table of people. Nicole monitored the whole thing like a project manager. Derek was out of line. Yes, I said. And you knew when you arranged this that there was a version where I reacted badly, where she had to absorb that in front of everyone. I held his gaze, not angry. Just level. You should apologize to her, not because it worked out, because that's the right thing to do regardless. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. Okay, he did apologize. Claire told me about it 2 days later on the phone, said he'd texted, something genuine enough that she believed he meant it, and that she'd accepted it without making it easy or making it hard. Accepted, I said. Not erased, she said. And I heard in those words that she'd used them before, that they were a personal principle, not a line. That was the moment I knew I was in real trouble. The good kind. 3 months in, she invited me to a reading, a small literary event at a bookstore on Kensington Road. The kind that happens on a Thursday night in a room with folding chairs and too much wine in a box. One of the poets she'd told me about was reading. Maybe 40 people. I stood at the back and watched Claire in the front row, talking to the poet before things started, completely at home, in a room that would have been opaque to me 6 months ago. The poet was in her 60s, deliberate and unhurried, and when she read the poem I'd gotten wrong, Claire turned slightly toward me from across the room with an expression that said, "See." Afterward, Claire introduced me as Scott, who had a defensible but incorrect reading of the third poem. The poet found this hilarious. I did not mind at all. Walking back to her car, she took my hand without any announcement. "Well," she said. "You were right about the third poem," I said. "I know. I'm not going to pretend I fully understood the ending." "You're not supposed to fully understand it," she said. "You're supposed to sit with it." "Is that a teaching note or a personal philosophy?" She looked at me sideways. "Both." I had met someone who moved through the world with her own internal logic, who didn't ask for permission and didn't issue disclaimers, who had offered me the better half of a lemon square without thinking about it, and texted me 3 poems the morning after a second date, and said, "Form your own opinion first." I thought about that for the rest of the walk. 6 months after Kevin's dinner, Claire and I drove up to Banff for a weekend. Not a significant occasion weekend, just a let's do this weekend. The kind that's actually better than the planned ones. We stayed at a mid-range hotel on Banff Avenue, walked the trail along the Bow River, ate too much at a fondue place she had researched in advance, and pretended was spontaneous. The second night, sitting in the hotel room with the window cracked and the sound of the river, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Always," I said. That night at Kevin's. When Derek said what he said, she paused. "Were you performing? Or did you mean it?" I didn't answer right away. "I meant it," I said. But I also knew the room was watching. Both things were true. She looked at me steadily. "The difference," I said, "is that I would have said the same thing if no one was watching." She was quiet for a moment. "I believe you," she said. "Good. I believed you then too," she said. "But I needed to hear you say it without an audience." That was Claire. Testing things not because she was suspicious, but because she was careful. Because she had learned, somewhere along the way, that things said in front of witnesses had a performance cost built in, and she needed to know what was left when the audience left. "The answer doesn't change," I said. "I know." She looked at the window. "That's why we're here." We moved in together the following spring, not dramatically, not because of a milestone conversation. She was at my apartment so often that she started keeping a box of her tea in my cupboard, and one evening she looked at the box and said, "This is inefficient." And 3 weeks later, we had a shared lease on a 2-bedroom in Inglewood, with good light and a kitchen that smelled like cardamom the first morning she made tea in it. She brought too many books. I had too many tools I didn't use. We compromised by building shelves and pretending that solved it. A year and a half after we moved in, I proposed on a Sunday morning, not a planned occasion, not a restaurant. We were at the farmer's market on Blackfoot, and she was holding a jar of local honey up to the light to check the color, the way she always did. And I was watching her and thinking that I'd been watching her do exactly this kind of thing for 2 years, and I wanted to keep watching it for every year after. I had the ring in my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks. "Claire," I said. She lowered the honey jar. "Read my face." Her expression shifted, not surprised exactly. More like, "Oh, now, I don't want to be the person who said the right thing at Kevin's dinner table," I said. "I want to be the person who's still choosing you on a Sunday at a farmer's market when nothing's at stake and nobody's watching." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she set the honey jar back on the table very carefully, turned fully toward me and said, "You've been carrying that ring for a while, haven't you?" 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment? "Waiting for a moment that felt like us," I said. "Which is apparently Sunday morning and local honey." She laughed. "The real one. The one that still catches me off guard." "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." She bought the honey. I carried it home. We told Kevin and Nicole over dinner that weekend, and Kevin spent the entire meal accepting congratulations for having arranged the whole thing, which Claire and I had silently agreed in the car on the way over to let him have. He had done one useful thing without meaning to. That seemed like enough. When people ask us how we met, Claire usually starts. She says, A mutual acquaintance set us up badly and expected a reaction. And then I say, fortunately, they underestimated both of us. And people laugh, and Kevin looks pleased. And Claire and I exchange a look that has nothing to do with the story we just told, and everything to do with the one we're still in the middle of. Have you ever been in a room where someone expected you to flinch and you didn't? Or had someone look at you like you were just the person in front of them, not a situation, not a test, just a person, and realized how rare that actually was? Tell me about it in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.